Good afternoon, folks. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about Sophie Cunningham's injury this afternoon. And I will probably be back again later. But I do want to talk about the notion that Sophie Cunningham was taken out deliberately. So I have watched this video now at least more than a dozen times, over and over and over and over again. And I don't see any, I don't see any area of this video where Sophie Cunningham was targeted for being taken out of a game. Okay. I will tell you what I saw. What I saw was her going to the basket to score points. We all know that that is the danger zone. Okay. You've got someone driving to the basket, and you had Sophie Cunningham defending, and in front of Sophie Cunningham, you also had Kelsey Mitchell trying to stop her as well. And I don't see that this girl literally deliberately targeted Sophie Cunningham's knee. I think she fell driving to the basket to score points. Both Mitchell and Cunningham were trying to stop her from scoring those points. This is, no matter how you look at it, a physical game. And accidents and injuries do happen. And that's unfortunate. Look, I'm not going to say that the WNBA doesn't have a problem. Do I think Caitlin Clark has been unfairly targeted for a year and a half? I do. I think she has been subject to more physicality than any other player in the league. Okay? There's no question about it. But Caitlin Clark's first injury came in the preseason, before they even played a competitive league game. Before the Brazil game, she had quad tightness in her left leg. Okay? So that was not brought about by anybody. I also don't believe her initial groin injuries were brought about by anybody targeting her. I think, in my mind, that a couple years of being bodied like she's bodied probably took a toll on her body. Okay. Now, I have no problem saying that when J.C. Sheldon pulled Caitlin Clark in the eye, that was deliberate. If Caitlin Clark had had the ball up at that time and was trying to either protect the ball from J.C. Sheldon or to pass the ball to somebody else, I could see maybe J.C. Sheldon's hand, you know, going in the wrong direction and poking Caitlin Clark in the eye. But that was not the case. The ball was down here, and Caitlin Clark was deliberately poked in the eye. I also know that I was at the game on July 15th, and under the basket, there was no way that J.C. Sheldon had any reason to lift her knee to defend against Caitlin Clark. And in that game, they did not even blow a whistle for a foul. And there should have been a whistle. So we can acknowledge that there have been players who have been targeted, Caitlin Clark being one of them. Kennedy Carter's knockdown of Caitlin Clark when the ball wasn't even in play was definitely a targeting. Marina Mabrey coming up and blindsiding Caitlin Clark after she got poked in the eye by J.C. Sheldon was targeting. I'm willing to go there. But the injury to Sophie Cunningham, I think, was an unfortunate basketball injury. It has happened to players before, okay? And I think it was just unfortunate the way she was standing and the way the player that was driving to the basket, and I cannot remember the girl's name. I know it's Bree Hartley. I believe it's Bree Hartley. And she has been accused of being dirty before, but I honestly know who's accusing her of that, and it's on other YouTube channels, and I'm not sure about that. Okay? I don't watch other basketball teams routinely. I watch the Indiana Fever with or without Caitlin Clark. But I don't sit down and watch WNBA League Pass. I purchased what I purchased, which was Fubo, because they show more Fever games than any other team or any other TV service. and I'm not interested in watching every WNBA team, okay? Just like when I was an NBA fan during the Bird era, I didn't watch every other NBA team. So I can't say anything about Hartley being dirty until I look at some of those clips, and I will go look at those, but I have not as of yet. I have not had time yet today. But I can tell you for what I'm looking at, that I don't believe Sophie Cunningham was targeted for being taken out of a game. And I will say this also. I will have in the description of the video Stephanie White's reaction to the injury. She's been pretty outspoken about how bad the refereeing has been in this league. No matter whether you like Stephanie White or not, she has been outspoken about it. She did not say a word about this other than basically, oh shit, because she knew she was going to lose another guard. Okay. So because I wanted to be absolutely sure of what I was looking at, and I did watch this over a dozen times, there is actually a gentleman who is a sports doctor who watched this entire thing unfold. And he's got about a 6-minute video, and I'm going to let you watch that because he also weighs in about whether or not this was deliberate. Okay, and he just confirmed what I was thinking. I had no idea going into this that this guy existed. I found him, quite honestly, after I watched the clip from the game. So let's see if I can show you this. It's worth watching the 6 minutes because right now, all we know is that Sophie Cunningham is having an MRI today. I looked just before I made this video. I haven't seen any results out there of what that MRI looked like. I don't even know if she's had it yet today. She is scheduled for one today. But this doctor also goes into what potential injuries she could have as a result of the way she was hit. So I'm going to let you watch this because I think it's worth watching.
Sophie Cunningham suffered a right knee injury on this play, and despite the potential severity of the injury, a big conversation point around this is that the WNBA is not doing enough to protect the safety of their players. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Suter, and the goal in this channel is to teach you all more about the medical side of the sports world. And I've got a lot of requests to talk about the WNBA, and so I thought this injury today with Sophie Cunningham was a good opportunity to do so. We'll first start with just what I think looking at the injury mechanism in terms of potential severity, and then touch on whether or not I think this really should be a concern about the intentionality of this play. So first thing first, of course, we're dealing with a right knee injury for Cunningham, and this is going to be contact. Of course, the player for Connecticut is going to fall into the outside of her right knee, and what that's most likely going to do, we can't exactly see her foot position down here, but I think what this is causing is a forced valgus load from the outside of Cunningham's knee, pushing it inward. If we back this up a little bit, initially you can see how her right foot is pointed forward, and so any sort of impact is going to cause a hyperextension, pushing the knee backwards. But then as the play continues here, it looks like she initially picks up that right foot. We can see it start to move a little bit. That's going to start to rotate her body so that now when the Connecticut player comes in and lands on her, the force is coming in from the outside of the knee and pushing it inward. What this is going to do is potentially cause a number of injuries to the inner medial side of Cunningham's knee from this forced external valgus load pushing the knee inward. Now, the primary things that are going to be on my differential here, of course, this can cause something like an ACL tear. We can see a forced valgus load where a player falls into the outside of their knee, pushes it inward, can cause enough stress to tear the ACL. I'll admit, just the impact, the positioning of her leg, to me did not look quite as significant for something like this. I think there's a little bit more force coming in kind of from the backside, pushing the back of the knee in that direction rather than directly in from the side. And so while yes, something like an ACL is a concern when you have one of these forced load valgus type of positions where the knee is going to be pushed inwards, this can cause an ACL tear. I don't think that would be the highest on my list. Another thing to consider is, of course, if the knee buckles inward, you're going to have stretch on the inside portion of the joint. The MCL ligament sits on the inside of the joint, and so that can certainly cause some stretch in the MCL when the knee is pushed inward. And so an MCL injury would be another thing on the differential here. A third one that we don't consider too often is going to be a patella dislocation or a kneecap dislocation. Similar mechanism, whenever the knee is valgusly forced inward, the patella has a tendency in its groove to, obviously it wants to stay nice and neutral in its groove, but when patella dislocations, kneecap dislocations happen, it's usually because the patella comes to the outside, the lateral side of the trochlea, from a combination of the knee being pushed inward. And that's another thing, especially with the way that Cunningham reacts with keeping her knee up in this flexed position. This is something that we see people do whenever they've had a patella instability event, because this is the position that is going to be most comfortable initially because they can't straighten their knee out because that kneecap is translated on the lateral side of the joint. So patella dislocation, definitely something that I think we have to keep in mind here because of the mechanism of that forced valgus impact from the outside pushing the knee inward, and the fact that she had her knee in this flexed position immediately is what you're going to see in somebody who had a patellar instability event. If we compare that to our biodigital anatomy tool here, we're looking straight on at a right knee. That external impact is going to be coming in from the outside, and so that's going to hit the outside of the knee and it's going to push it inward. That's going to be that valgus load. That valgus load, as the knee buckles inward, is going to potentially cause tension or stress on that MCL ligament that sits right here on the inside portion of the joint. The patella, sitting right here in this little groove of the femur called the trochlea, can displace out lateral to the side. That's going to be a patellar dislocation because, again, as that knee gets pushed inwards, the patella can sometimes pop out as it wants to get pulled lateral. Again, I don't think ACL is going to be too high on my list, but definitely a possibility with this type of mechanism. It just didn't seem like the exact right combination of forces compared to what we will typically see for a contact ACL injury. Now, the second part of this is this question of what's going on with like player safety. Was this intentional? Is the WNBA not doing a good enough job of protecting their players? I think it was Cunningham's sister put out a tweet on X about protect our players, like this was an intentional thing that the officials should have prevented. I will be honest, watching this video replay, there's nothing to me that screams intentional here. To me, this is a player who's coming in for a drive. They stop. As we often see with players driving into the lane, the momentum carries them forward. She doesn't turn her body to then fall more into Cunningham. She continues straight in her trajectory that she's going into the lane here. And I think this truly is just an unfortunate thing that's going to happen whenever you're playing high-level sports. Again, she drives in, there's contact, the feet get a little bit tangled up. You can't expect her to be completely upright here. It's going to be natural for somebody driving in to allow their momentum to kind of carry them down to the ground in a controlled way. She doesn't lean more into Cunningham. It's not like she dives at Cunningham's knees. I truly think this is just an unfortunate thing that is going to happen throughout the course of playing high-level sports. So again, in summary here, the things that I'm going to be thinking about. Remember, we've got this forced valgus load from the outside of the knee. Yes, something like an ACL tear would be the worst case scenario and could have happened with this mechanism, but I think more likely we're dealing with potentially an injury to the MCL ligament on the inside of the knee, maybe a patella dislocation. And also remember, right, you've got a fibula bone is sitting there on the outside of the knee. You could have enough trauma to that fibula bone to cause a fracture in the outer part of the joint. So definitely a lot of other things to keep in mind on the differential and consider here. But with the limited replay that we have, that would be the mechanism and the things that I would keep in mind. That's it for the
So I know there was a lot of technical talk, but he's given his best guesstimate on what the things are that could be wrong with Sophie Cunningham's knee. And, you know, when you look up all of those things, it's anywhere from 3 weeks to months, depending upon what the injury is. Again, like I've said with Caitlin Clark, there is no way a sports injury can be predicted when you're exactly going to be well enough to come back. You can't say I'll be back in 3 weeks. You just can't do that. This is why people say there is no timeline for their return, which also turns out to be a big conspiracy theory for the most part for a lot of talking heads out there. Now, look, I have acknowledged, okay, that the NBA, WNBA, the WNBA, not the NBA, but the WNBA has an officiating problem. Okay, they are ineffective, inefficient, and they simply sometimes swallow the whistle. We know this. This is why I have the petition out there, which quite frankly is moving slowly. Okay, 465 signatures is not going to mean anything. And I truly believe that the fans need to be heard from. So I will try to step it up and share this stuff more. But the reality is that it's moving slowly. And until we have more signatures, it's not going to mean much of anything. We have had the coaches speak out. Okay, we have. Not just Stephanie White, but also the coach of the Valkyries has spoken out. There have been several coaches who have spoken out about the fact that the officiating is inefficient and just generally horrible. Okay, so what we know is the mindset of the league is that we're on it. I really don't know what that means, but I have said this before. I think that to use freelancers in professional sports games is absolutely stupid. Okay. The referees need to be employed by the WNBA and paid by the WNBA. They need to be trained by the WNBA. They need to follow the rules of the WNBA handbook. Okay. And I have a copy of that handbook. Okay. And I will put it in the description of this video. All right. And they need to be held accountable by the WNBA. And whoever is the person who manages the officiating, and I believe it's Sue Block. I don't even know. I've never even seen her anywhere. She needs to hold these referees accountable. It isn't just a question, okay, of retraining these people. There's got to be some kind of accountability. Because what tends to happen is once you have had a pattern of not blowing the whistle and not calling fouls and people getting injured, is that everything becomes ripe for a targeting or a dirty play. And I don't see that as a dirty play. I see that as someone driving to the basket. I've watched Caitlin Clark drive to the basket a million times. You know, I've seen Kelsey Mitchell drive to the basket a million times. And there are opportunities for injury all throughout sports. Okay? That's just a fact of life. So that's where I am on this one. I simply don't see it. I mean, yes, Hartley has been given a flagrant before, but guess what? Caitlin Clark got a flagrant this year against Angel Reese. But that doesn't mean that Caitlin Clark is a dirty player. I don't think Caitlin Clark is a dirty player at all. At all. Okay, there was a play that I actually showed on video where Caitlin Clark was taking a three, and the player violated her space and came down on top of Caitlin Clark's foot. I didn't see that as a target. Okay, I saw that as someone who had her momentum going and just happened to violate that space that is solely there for Caitlin Clark. She got a flagrant for that, a flagrant one. Caitlin Clark's was a flagrant one. Okay, so players are going to get those. That doesn't automatically make them a dirty player. I don't see Caitlin Clark as a dirty player. And in fact, the play on Angel Reese, do you know what Angel Reese's response was? The referee got it right. Let's just move on. There was no drama. I have to give it to Angel Reese on that count. That's just the way it was. And Caitlin Clark was going for the ball. All right. And it was just a particularly hard hit because that stuff does happen. So that's where we are with this. I don't know anything about Sophie Cunningham and her injury right now, but I expect that I will before the end of this day. And I am planning on making another video, so I will be back. I've got some interesting stuff to show you about Caitlin Clark playing soccer and how she could have been a professional soccer player if she really wanted to. So we'll show you a little bit of that. And that's it. I just wanted to update you on the Sophie Cunningham thing. Again, I don't think she was being targeted. I think it was just a hard hit under the basket. It was just one of those things where the player was in momentum, going for a layup, and just couldn't stop. And Sophie Cunningham was playing defense. I will talk to you guys later.